changing.
Well, this is definitely a 7 out of 10. Book 1 alone was actually a 6 out of 10, but I could not give it such an average rating after giving Book 2 a chance, so the show as a whole is 7 out of 10. Although, this rating might change depending on what Book 4 has in store for us, so don't think that this is the last time we'll be hearing about the series. Now the story actually started at a not so great introduction. The scenery was grand and all, but I guess the writers wanted to set a foundation right off the bat. Most shows these days actually try to find more creative ways and introduce their world to the audience without doing the once upon a time bit, but hey, it's not so bad relying on the basics, right? What this show did so great is that most of the things you'll see, every detail of the scenery has a purpose.
You fought bravely.
Thank you. My name is Marcos.
Well, almost all things, since there are some unnecessary goofs and gaffes that the show could actually live without, and they could have fleshed out some things more rather than resolving the awkwardness of some conflicts by compensating with comedy.
Maybe we took a wrong turn and wagged up on a sleepy slope.
I'll have to check my map, but I'm fairly certain I recognize the unmistakable topography of Mount Monotonous.
Maybe the lack of seriousness and the overuse of jokes was inspired by the popularity of a lot of movies at that time, or the goal might be to make the show as something that all ages could watch. Either way, that might actually work, but at the cost of the story's flow and structure. Zadia as a world looked so beautiful, it was interesting and vast as well, yet the show, due to how seamlessly it presented the transition of environments, it kinda made the world look small and the places so near to each other that our heroes could travel by foot without delay. Magic was the most appealing part of the series, and because things started off in the human kingdoms of which there was barely any magic, it was a little bit disappointing to see so little of it. Like, I mean, sure, there were a few spells here and there, but the environment was lacking until Book 3 was up. I get that there should be a distinction between the two realms that divide the continent, but it's still the same land mass by the end of the day, so the scarcity of magic flowers on one side and the abundance of another just didn't make sense. The writers could give an excuse that magic used to be abundant in all sides, but due to dark magic some things just died out, but no explanation was given nor implied. As the title shows, the story revolves around the Dragon Prince, the MacGuffin that our heroes need to deliver back to the Dragon Queen. The egg at the prologue was actually not destroyed but stolen by this guy. We have 3 protagonists in this story. The first ones to be introduced were the brothers named Ezran and Callum. They are the princes of one of the 5 human kingdoms. But unlike most of the typical stories out there with royals involved, these two were good, semi-normal, and not spoiled or even tyrannical. Ezran was a very fun character, and with his animal companion, Bait, made situations more enjoyable to watch. Yeah, they have a glowing bulldog like Toad whose name is Bait. Without the magical creatures in the series, the world would have been boring. Ezran at first was like a side character for his brother Callum, who seemed like the main protagonist, but later on the story tried to show how special he is by dropping a superpower on him all of a sudden at the end of the first book. Like, this could have been hinted properly on episode 8 or even earlier if they reduced the gaps of the show, and no, talking to Bait constantly is not a hint that he could understand animals. Like, even my youngest relatives talk to dogs, so talking to Bait doesn't come off as eccentric, but rather he becomes more relatable. Magic or no magic, his behavior looks normal by our standards. Callum is an interesting character despite how common his type is in the anime world. I know that this is not a Japanese animation, but I still think that it's okay to compare similar things to each other. He's quirky, and just as fun as Ezran, although some maturity is apparent since he's the older brother after all. He tries to be good at anything, but thankfully he is aware that he can't be. Some protagonists from other shows follow the standard that the hero needs to be oblivious at the beginning, so that when writers need to insert a character arc it becomes easier to do so. So instead of changing throughout the journey, our heroes maintained and reinforced their principles instead. Callum from the beginning to the end remained good, no BS of turning evil, or getting tricked by the villains to do their bidding, and when he makes a mistake apologies are immediate rather than forming a great divide between the other protagonists.
No! I get to choose who I want to be. Your destiny is already written. No! Destiny is a book you write yourself.
In short, he resolves conflict quickly, and he's smart about it most of the time, brave when it comes down to it. The next protagonist is Rayla. She's an elf who was supposed to assassinate the king. Her personality was surprisingly well balanced. Most combat-driven characters can be extreme, but she had principles as well that kept her good. Like the beginning of her introduction made it so apparent that she's not a cold-blooded killer. And when she was presented with the dragon egg, she found hope instantaneously and deemed that killing one another is not the solution to the world's problems anymore.
Renan, please! There has to be another way! This is a miracle, a chance for peace!
Despite having a lot of strengths, she still had weaknesses as well, and it made her real in a sense despite being a fictional elf. From her accents to her actions, she was relatable and enjoyable to watch. The dynamic between all three characters felt so right.
Greetings, fellow humans, human fellas. I sure do like hanging out with other humans and talking about things like money and starting wars.
They are foils to each other, but they ultimately cover their bases and help one another for what they lack. Like Rayla could have been easily a Mary Sue, but they made her usage of magic limited to being invisible under a full moon, so Callum as a mage becomes significant, and rather than portraying her as a perfect soldier, she was just as quirky as the brothers, if not more sometimes. In fact, Callum is still a questionable character right now due to how he has powers, while ignoring the hard magic system the story established in the beginning.
Humans can't do magic.
But I did do magic.
Right. With a primal stone. But then you smashed it. So now you're just a standard human again.
Although again, he's not a perfect wizard that could do anything and everything, so as a team they work together to survive and accomplish their goal. The villain of the story was actually very interesting as well. Rather than making one up that was ultimately evil, they gave Viren more depth than any character out there. Of course the comedy makes him shallow at times, but he started off as someone who actually means well. People theorize how dark magic could have encouraged his descent to immorality and injustice, and he gives off this vibe similar to characters from Warcraft and Lord of the Rings. He may have caused most if not all of the conflicts and problems that Zydia is facing right now. Specifically stealing the Dragon Prince in the first place, but I suspect that he might turn things around in Book 4, especially since the mysterious greater evil was evolving into something even more powerful at the end of Book 3. A major cliffhanger of which I love, but is frowned upon by many since the next book might not come out anytime soon due to some difficulties at the moment. Viren is the perfect example of someone who's paved the road to hell with good intentions.
If we can hunt this monster and slay it, I can use the heart of the Titan in a powerful spell that will warm the land, and allow us to magically grow an incredible bounty.
Enough to feed 2 kingdoms.
Enough to feed 10 kingdoms.
I know that not all characters should necessarily have a redemption arc, but Viren is obviously set up to be someone who could do good at the very end. He's still a prick though, regardless of the circumstances. I hope that they continue this trend that they have with Book 3, more magic, more romance, more world building as most of the kingdoms and realms unite at this point. But less to no resurrections next time on Book 4.
Somehow I survived the fall.
No. You didn't.
I know that it doesn't make sense to kill off Viren too early, but I want the writers to solidify the meaning of someone's passing, so reviving the king for some reason or making the queen as someone who was just in hiding in Zydia is a big no-no. Freeing those who were turned into coins is somewhat okay, but they should reduce the comedy when resolving the conflict within the hearts of the characters. All in all, the scenery was great, specifically Book 3, the music could have been better, it blended too much with the scenery and the mood of the situations, but it wasn't memorable, just standard. The characters were awesome, like a Scottish elf was a great surprise since most of the time that accent is affiliated with dwarves, it was refreshing. The story itself was simple but the journey was fun. Hopefully you enjoyed the Dragon Prince as well. That's all for now, thanks for watching.